IVM.
Hey everybody, welcome to another amazing week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money, for supporting the network. Guys, you should definitely check out some of the content that we're doing recently, which is somewhat COVID related. Pavan's been doing an awesome job on the Pragati podcast. All Thing Policy has also got a tremendous number of really great episodes about what's going on and the impact. We talk about this stuff on Cyrus Says, especially in the Cock and Bull episodes. On Advertising is Dead, Varun's had a couple of episodes where he's spoken about the impact of this, as is Karthik on the Filter Coffee podcast. And across the network, definitely do check it out. I'm sure you'll enjoy yourself. And with that, let's get you to your show.
This is Storytellers and Story Sellers. You're listening to Vineet Kanabar live on tape on IVM Podcast. On today's episode, we're talking to someone who's leading the charge in video technology. If you're someone who's interested in the evolution of video, let me take a second and tell you about how technology and video and filmmaking have always been the sort of leading edge of what's available to filmmakers, right? Whether it's nature, whether it's deep sea, whether it's drones, right? The way we've been able to progress in what gets captured on film, right from the beginning of the 20th century to now, is nothing short of fascinating in itself. But I'll spare you the gory details of all of that and focus on what our guest has to offer today. Please say hello to Rahat Kulshreshtha, CEO and founder of Quidich. He's also the president of the Drone Federation of India. I'm really excited to have Rahat on here as well, because Rahat's not just someone who's invested in video tech. He's also an entrepreneur with a background as a filmmaker. So very excited about our chat today, Rahat. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vineet, for having me on the show. Really excited to see where we get with our conversation today.
Lovely. Rahat, let me get you started with a quick introduction to our listeners, right? Like I mentioned, you started out as a filmmaker, then you've pivoted into running a company, which is also very bootstrapped. So clearly you have your unit economics and principles very well in place. Can you help us with some highlights of that journey? Give us some background about how you got here. From filmmaking. I think 2013, 2014 was when you were still making films, and that's when this journey started. A quick highlight reel of the last 5 years to introduce you to our listeners.
Sure. So it's quite an interesting journey, because when you start doing entrepreneurship, it all becomes about planning and forecasting and thinking. But the funny thing is that in most stories, when you hear about how something started, it's mostly just by chance. And that's exactly how our story was as well. It was a combination of lots of random things that, just fell into place. I used to, before this entrepreneurship journey, I was a filmmaker myself. I'd studied film at the University of Westminster in London. And I was working in the film industry in England. And then, on a whim, just moved back to India saying, Apna Bharat Mahan, and really want to be part of this really exciting journey of what's happening in India. Swadesh story. And I think, opportunity-wise and with what all is happening in India, it's the time to be here. And, just move back with no ideas as to what's going to happen. Just stumbled across the opportunity of starting to direct music videos, and then one after the other, I was directing music videos. And, as one of the music videos, what we required was a shot from above. I had a beautiful Audi R8 on the Greater Noida Expressway, and, we wanted to see the shot from above because it was a beautiful car. And, just started researching and trying to find how do we get this. And the only way was to hire a chopper. And I was like, that's going to be too expensive to do. So reached out to this one person who had this remote controlled, what we now know as drones. They were called helicams at that time, and said, can you do this? And, he gave me an absurd pricing and said something like, it'll cost you 2 lakh rupees for 2 hours. And I was like, that's obscene. So I started doing my research, and I was like, hey, but I can buy this for 2 lakh rupees if I, just go to New York. So I suggested this to this gentleman. He got really upset, and he's like, then why have you called me? Just go and buy it. So that's what I did. And that was really the first time how, we got introduced to drones as a concept. It was just by serendipity.
You just took his advice.
Yeah, I took his advice. The next music video, I was actually shooting it in New York. So I threw it into the budget of that music video, went to the shop, bought it. Half of it was paid for by the shoot itself, because it was a fairly long shoot.
Okay.
And that's how we got it. And then, right off the back of that, I ended up doing a liberal arts course at the Ashoka University. And over there, my roommate Gaurav, said that, hey, why don't we do this as a business? And I was like, hey, I'm not a businessman. Entrepreneurship's not my thing. I'm a filmmaker. Let me be. And he's like, no, we've got 9 months as part of this course. Let's give it a shot. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, we just go back to what we were doing. So, my roommate, who now is my co-founder and probably one of the key reasons why we, ended up here, is basically a very long and short of how we ended up starting off Quidich. Obviously, at the end of those 9 months, we had got a really big project that gave us the validation that what we're doing is generally in the right direction, and there is some traction towards it. We got to cover the entire 2014 Lok Sabha elections for Aaj Tak, which is the news channels. 40 days we were traveling around the country just shooting the elections, and the moment we did that, we knew that there's something in this game. Yeah.
Such a heartwarming origin story, right? You run into a challenge and the guy is just like, bro, kharid lo na usse acha to, and you just like go ahead and do it. It's beautiful. Rahat, one of the reasons why I started this podcast, one of the sort of foundational myths that I wanted to dispel is the creative versus business conflict, right? वो मतलब एक होता है, it's a thing that has been created that creative will always be at odds with business. But for you, from being a filmmaker, obviously much more invested in the creative aspects, to moving to the business side of things, and then running it bootstrapped, running it with a close friend, what would be some of the highlights or milestones that you'd say? I mean, you talked about the Aaj Tak campaign covering Lok Sabha. I'm pretty sure that was a massive project. But what else gave you that kind of validation, right? What else helped you and Gaurav to continue to stay the course, even though there might have been challenges? A couple of quick ones would be really wonderful to both help understand how you made decisions right at the beginning, and how you kind of stayed the course as well.
Sure. So I see 3 questions over there. One is about what gave us the validation.
I do that. I have complex.
So one is about what gave us the validation. Second is about the transition from a filmmaker to an entrepreneur, and that's actually a very important one for me. So I'll talk about that. And the third is about being bootstrapped. So really about validation, it was just a question of one thing working out after the other. A lot of things didn't work as well, but I think one of the key things about what we did was really timing. And we hear this very often, and you read about it very often, but when you experience it, you really know what it really means. I think when we started this, we were genuinely amongst the first few people who were doing it. And I think that really gave us some incredible traction. So we were able to do projects that, today if we started off would be very hard to get our hands on. But we were able to do really, really interesting and innovative projects at that time, which gave us the understanding that, yes, there is a market. So, just to be able to go from what was supposed to be a 1-day or a 2-day project for Aaj Tak, but the moment we gave the shots and we pushed on our creativity and showed them what is possible, to get extended to a 40-day contract immediately, was a very, very big thing. And straight off the bat, within less than a year of you starting off, if you're being able to, capture the elections, being able to fly on one of the most iconic elections that have happened in the country, over the most historic people that, we've seen in Indian politics, whether it's, shots of Banaras with, the Aam Aadmi Party and Arvind Kejriwal, or it's, the current Prime Minister and, his talks and just experiencing all of that energy on the ground. I think just that being, one thing after the other really working out gave us that validation. And, it's an interesting story when you're bootstrapping, that validation is a constant requirement. With technology changing almost on a monthly basis today, you've always got to keep checking on that validation metric to ensure that, yes, you are still one step ahead of the game, because you've got to keep creating those barriers and making sure that what you're doing is still relevant. Because if you become complacent based on saying, oh, I've just done the best projects in the country, that's probably the end of your journey, especially when you're bootstrapped. If you have a lot of capital to back you, then that at least helps you sail through the journey a lot easier. But when you're bootstrapped, I think you've got to always just stay one step ahead of the curve to ensure that you just don't fall.
Which is why the second question to me is like super interesting, because as a filmmaker, you're like budget is what, I mean, you can make what the budget allows you. And from there, the paradigm shift to saying, okay, budget is not what we're looking for. We're probably going to be much more jugadu, quote unquote, and still deliver quality, right? So the balance between quality that a filmmaker's bent of mind brings and the jugaad that a businessman's bent of mind brings, that I'd love to know how you kind of work through that.
So it's honestly been one of the toughest decisions of my life. More so because for the longest time I was in denial of the question itself. And what I mean to say by that is that I've always thought that, the creative side of me and the filmmaker side of me can coexist with the entrepreneur side of me. And
Right.
with the kind of business that we had set up, there was no reason that wouldn't be possible because, we were doing filmmaking. I was getting to go and fly the drone myself. I was really being able to operate. Gaurav was being able to look at the business side of things. And, I always thought that was a possibility. So for about 2 years, I lived in that denial where I was just trying to make those two things coexist. Till I realized that no, it's going to have to be a decision. And I think I took one more year after that to really, seal that decision and take my choice as to do I want to continue my life as a filmmaker or do I want to look at myself as a businessman? Because, really at the end of the day, when you spend a lot of time doing these things, you realize that it all boils down to your focus and it all boils down to what you're focusing on. And as an individual, if I focus to be a filmmaker, then I've got to be honing and, improving my skills in a certain
Right.
direction. And, as an entrepreneur, what I've got to be spending my time on is absolutely something completely, almost diametrically opposite to what a filmmaker needs to be doing. And which is why that decision was very critical. So I actually took a 10-day holiday to Ladakh, drove from Delhi to Ladakh and literally sat in the mountains and thought about this because it was as critical a question. It took me 2 years to come to terms with actually accepting that it's a decision I'm going to have to take. And then about a year after that, which ended in this trip, and I took the decision of, going down the entrepreneurship route. And it has been one of the most rewarding experiences for me because, it really gives me a lot of similarities to what I was experiencing as a filmmaker in terms of, the creativity I can apply to the business, a certain amount of risk that is involved in the business, a certain amount of involvement and putting your heart and soul into it. A lot of those kind of aspects are very similar in entrepreneurship as to filmmaking, but obviously your day-to-day activity is very different. And I've been very fortunate that I've really enjoyed that decision and enjoyed the journey of an entrepreneurship so far. It's still very early in the game, and we've got a long way ahead to go. But it's been a fantastic journey so far. I can say that.
Yeah,
sure.
and I think like well begun is hard, and I love the ring in your voice when you talked about your journey. It's something that you can't acquire. It's something that you can only live through, right? It's beautiful. I love the way you put that, and the 10-day journey to Ladakh. I think a lot of my listeners will relate to that as well. Let me switch this over to talk about drones a little bit, right? The first time that I encountered a drone or drone footage in its seriousness, and I have this like a small one lying around in the house as well. But the first time that I encountered one in all its seriousness was when in my previous job at TVF we were shooting tripling, and that was the first time in the mountains, shots of cars going over narrow bridges, beautiful shots that came out of there, right? Now, while the applications of drones in fiction, in sports, in nature, wildlife have been around for a bit, right? I'd love to know what you've seen as some of the most innovative applications on drones, and I want to get started with these innovations because again, it's not just drones, right? We were talking about this a little while earlier, and video tech has evolved so much. But yeah, if we start with the narrow point of drones and say, and you can tell us about some of the most innovative applications that you might have seen.
So I think I'll start by talking about what we do today with drones, and I think what is the simple industry that has really changed is the fact that traditionally, if you wanted that super wide shot and you wanted to establish a city or you wanted to establish an area, you had to hire a chopper, and that was the only way of being able to get that shot. What we've been able to replace with drones, or what drones have replaced as a concept, is really that helicopter shot.
Right.
With 5 more dimensions attached to it. So you could get that wide shot, but then you could also go from that wide shot and come into that narrow alley. So, a very good example of this was what we did during Gully Boy, which was a shot where we wanted to establish Mumbai as a city, but then we wanted to, reveal the slums. And the way we did that in the film was actually very interesting, where we flew through these two buildings where you could see they are high-rise buildings. And, all you could see were those two buildings, and then you kind of fly through them and you reveal the slum. And, you can see that the trailer actually started with that shot because you suddenly introduce it in such an interesting way. Now, a chopper would never be able to do that. So what it's done for filmmakers and cinematographers is really give a third dimension to the camera, where traditionally you could only do X and Y movements, a little bit of Z with a jib. But the drone has given you access to be able to, be completely limitless and free in the movement in X, Y, and Z. And I think that's really what the drone has done for the film industry and broadcast. So if you see what we do for cricket, we cover the entire IPL and a lot of other international tournaments as well. What we're able to do is traditionally you could only see the match from inside. So during an IPL, you've got 9 stadiums, but for the viewer, they all look the same because from inside, everything's green, everything has a boundary, and, the stands might be marginally different. So if you're a passionate person, you might be able to tell the difference between two different stadiums. But the moment you introduce a drone into the picture, you can suddenly say, all right, this is the Chinnaswamy Stadium in this city. This is the Wankhede in Mumbai. You can see the Queen's Necklace. You can see a lot more of the city. So suddenly the context of the stadium gets established in the city, and that's what it solves for in the sports context, where suddenly as part of the storytelling of the game, you're able to see a lot more than just what's happening inside the stadium. You're able to see the larger picture of where the stadium is situated and get a much more bird's eye view, as we can say.
Right.
In terms of applications of drones, that's actually a question I can spend an entire podcast about. I think it's one of the most incredible technologies that our generation is going to see. We're still nowhere. I would say we're at 10% of what the actual applications of drones are going to be in our lifetimes. It is going to be one of the most fundamental. It's going to be as fundamental as mobile phones were, as the internet was, as cars were. Drones is going to be that next revolution, because every single industry that I can think of and that you can ask me right now, I can tell you a way that the drone is going to transform the way that industry works, the way that industry collects data in mining, the way that in telecom towers you would, do your assessment of the towers, the way you would travel tomorrow. We are going to have drones, the way you get your deliveries tomorrow, everything. I mean, imagine tomorrow ordering a pizza and getting delivered to your doorstep. If that's the technology and the potential that we're talking about. How long is it going to take, and when is it going to happen is really the only question. Is it going to happen? The answer is definitely yes.
No, I think it's well on its way, right? Military applications obviously precede public and civil applications by about 8 to 10 years, maybe, right? So if Obama was using drones way back in 2008, I think 2020, 2025 is where I would say more widespread application will happen. Let me ask you this. What has been the most unexpected application of drones that you've seen? Obviously, I mean, you've spent a lot of time with it, and some stuff is kind of de rigueur, right? You'll be right. You want an interesting wide shot, get a drone in. You can do it for cheaper instead of a helicopter. Jibs are harder to operate. I'm guessing, are jibs harder to operate than drones? I would say jibs might be a little harder to operate than drones.
I mean, the amount of skill required is almost the same. You can be a good jib operator in 4 weeks' time, and you can be a good drone operator in 4 weeks' time. And to be the best jib operator, you need to at least spend 4 years. To be the best drone operator, you've got to spend at least 4 years. I think it's the amount of
10,000 hours principle.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of precision required in our work is extremely high, because the cost of time in film is very, very high. When you're on a set, it's not just your time that you're charging per day, or it's not just that time. The time gets multiplied so fast because you've suddenly got 400 extras on set. You've got a celebrity on set, and you can make one mistake where you operated the drone and you didn't get the shot right. Maybe if the director is nice, you can do 2. But the moment you've messed up a shot, you've messed up 3 takes or 4 takes because of your fault, that's probably the last time you're on set. So you've got to make sure that you can't screw up a shot, especially when the stakes are so high, when you've got 3 or 4 actors on set, you've got 200-300 cast. I remember a shot we were doing for this movie Kalank, and we were up in the mountains, and we had got Alia Bhatt to climb up this mountain, and she had already had a full day of shoot. And, we're on this mountain where we climbed up 1 kilometer high up in Kargil, and we're standing up there, and it starts snowing. And I'm just thinking to myself, we've just got these 100 extras over here. We've got the cast climb up all the way. And, so we just took the decision and we flew in the snow because we were like, that's the cost of time, and you just got to make sure
what
that
else can you do?
Yeah, you just got to make the most of a situation and do the best you can. So I looked at the director and I was like, I'm going to take this risk, but just remember, it's going to be a shared risk. So let's take off. And we took off and we got the shot, and the shot was in the film. But, and it wasn't just that. It was also that the light was going because we were on the mountain. It was sunset time. The light was going. So, it was a combination of so many things. We knew there was no way we were going to be able to come back to get that shot. So, you've got to take those decisions in those kind of times.
I think you put it very nicely when you said it's the time cost of creating, the time cost of entertainment definitely is something that needs to be kept in mind when you're doing something like this. Let me pivot to talking about.
I'll answer your question very quickly that you asked. Sorry, I completely missed that, which was actually what is was one of the interesting applications. So I'll talk about two very quickly. One's a really funny one,
sure.
Which was we were contracted by this company that was doing a television show on Hanumanji, and they wanted to do an activation in smaller cities to be able to attract a lot of people to the television show. And in conversation, we ended up with this concept where we were going to build a 6-foot Hanumanji and put him onto a drone and fly those across cities. And we weren't sure what the output of that is going to be and what it's going to look like and what it's going to generate in terms of traction. But what we ended up with was pretty phenomenal. I'm not very proud of the project because it's got its own challenges from a religious perspective. But the fact is that people actually saw this and they went down on the floor and they thought Hanumanji has arrived, and it was quite a fascinating use of the tool because you could suddenly see him flying in with the parvat in his hand, and it was pretty real when you're in a place where
experiential storytelling,
when you don't know what drones are and you just see this as a visual for the first time in your life, it's a life-changing experience. And I think the second most heartwarming experience that I've had is during the earthquake in Nepal. We had traveled to Nepal to cover the earthquake for a news channel, and then we were doing, we stayed on to be able to do some relief work. And we were in this place called Sindhupal Chowk, which is a valley, and we were just flying to just see, it was a really beautiful valley. And suddenly some people came and they said, sir, उस पहाड़ के ऊपर आप drone भेज सकते हैं? तो हमने कहा बिल्कुल भेज सकते हैं. मैंने कहा क्या हुआ? So he said, actually that village is so far up in the mountain that to be able to get to that point, it's an 8-hour trek. And there's no motorable road to go there. And because of that, what's happened is that it's been 4 days or 5 days since the major earthquake had hit, but no relief work has actually even gone to even assess the situation there because everyone's just dealing with what they can see. So we suddenly sent the drone up, and we could get an entire detailed assessment of what was going on up in the mountain. And then we suddenly had a lot of people come in and say, can we go to that village and that village and that village? And from that one place in the center of the valley, we were able to cover almost 4 or 5 villages and assess the entire situation, hand over that data to the local people on the ground who were there from, the amnesties and the Red Crosses to be able to give that data and say, listen, there's a village up there where we see a lot of destruction. People are outside their houses. The houses are destructed. In a matter of about 2 hours, I had covered area that if we had gone on foot would have been at least 40 to 50 hours. And, that for me as an application of the drone was absolutely phenomenal. To be able to get from point A to point B in unprecedented times, I think was incredible.
No, that's really tremendous. I mean, just visualizing that as you were talking about it and trying to get into the state of mind of the guy or the families there in that village, and then to see this machine come into their village, I think it must have been surreal and really, really, really amazing. Sounds insane to be able to do something like that. A little bit of magic, a little bit of science, a little bit of magic. Beautiful. Let me pivot to talking about Quidich a little bit. You started this with your partner Gaurav. You've been bootstrapped for a while. How did you go about building your early team, right? I think when you must have been starting out, but with the first mover advantage also comes the fact that your talent nahi hai. You don't have a lot of people who understand this space. There isn't a lot of expertise. Um, Cash flow is a problem as well. So how did you go about those early years building the team? I want to start here and follow up with a couple of questions about Quidditch itself. So would love to know if there's like a philosophy that you put in place right at the beginning. Would love to know that.
So I don't think we had this philosophy right in the beginning, but the moment I heard Warren Buffett say this about hiring, I could totally relate to it. And that's really, I mean, Warren Buffett very sort of has regularly spoken about, that there are three things that you've got to look for when you're hiring. And that's really intelligence, energy, which is, also initiative and enthusiasm, and integrity. And, if you need to have integrity is the most important thing, because otherwise, if you have the other two and no integrity, then you're in a pretty stuck place. So I think that's really been one of the core philosophies of how we built our teams. And I can very proudly say today that you'd see that with absolutely everyone that works with us today, where the amount of energy and enthusiasm that they work with towards what they're doing, the amount of passion that there is incredible. You can have an interesting conversation with absolutely anybody in the team from top to bottom, and integrity is one of the key parts, because what we do is very tough. It requires a lot of training and a lot of hand-holding and a lot of work together as a team, and then it's important to be able to grow together. So I think those are the three principles we've been able to build this team on, and I'm really, really proud of the team that we have, because it's just so inspiring to walk into an office where you can have engaging conversations with absolutely anybody in the team, and there's always something new to learn and something new to do. As part of this Corona period, we've kind of started this initiative where we are getting everybody in the team to do a webinar once a week for the rest of the team, and it's just so nice to see people from the team come out and take classes on things like CAD and things, things that I didn't even know were skill sets that were there in the office, but people taking the initiative to be able to take on things like that. It's really exciting and a very proud feeling to be able to have a team like that.
How big is the team now?
We're 20 people now, which is a combination of an operations team, which is the people that go out on the field and would be flying the drones. We have a ground-based remote-controlled car that goes around the cricket field. You might have seen it during the IPL. It's called the Q Buggy. And then we have a kite cam, which is a 4-point, similar to what you see in cricket with the spider cam. We've got an indoor version of that now, which can do a lot of very interesting, it's everything that the drone can do in a very tight indoor environment, or in a large environment. So we've got an operations team that operates all of this equipment, and then we've got a technology team that builds layers of technology on top of all of this to be able to make sure that we're one step ahead. And then we've got the management team. So yeah.
I think that's lovely. Let me follow that up with a question about the business at Quidich, right? Can you share what categories or what companies form the bulk of your current clients? And then I'll follow that up with some of the sunrise industries, so to speak, within video tech that you're encountering. So yeah, first up, about who would be the bulk of your clients. You already talked about sports leagues. You already talked about news channels, but some of the others that may not get as much mention or may not be as glamorous. I'd love to know where this is going with some of your clients.
So, as a company, we've had a very interesting journey where we started with filmmaking and then did almost 8 to 10 pivots in between across different industries. And then we came back to our core, which was, the film and broadcast world. So as part of those pivots, we had worked with all kinds of people. There were mining companies, telecom companies, all kinds of roads, railways. We've surveyed railway tracks from Delhi to Mathura for the Northern Railways. We've done all kinds of projects. We've surveyed railway tracks in Raipur, in Naxal-infected areas, and all kinds of stuff. But today we've kind of narrowed all of that down to a very focused approach of what we're doing, which is 4 effective industries. One being Bollywood. So, all of the big ticket players from, the Dharmas. We've done, shooting for Kalang, for Brahmastra, Elidele Mushkil. You can look at Gully Boy with Excel, Rajkumar Hirani, Sanju. Bollywood being one large category. Sports broadcast being the second large category. So whether it's Kabaddi or IPL, recently we did the Women's World Cup in Australia. We did the Under-19 World Cup in South Africa. So, a lot of cricket and sports broadcast that way. We also do Kabaddi with Star Sports. And then, it would be television, which would be, your news television, which is what we spoke about earlier, but then also, entertainment. So general entertainment, which would be, we had our little buggy go around in circles for Kaun Banega Crorepati. So if you saw the season this year, the shot where the 1 crore shot happens is actually a shot which goes round and round Mr. Bachchan and the contestant, and that's really on the buggy. So we had our buggy system that was in Kaun Banega Crorepati throughout that whole show. And our kite cam is also something that goes across a lot of general entertainment. So dance shows and music shows and things like that. The kite cam is able to play a very, very dynamic role to be able to add a lot of movement in those shots. And movement is one of really the key words of what we as a company offer to all of these industries. All of one common thread across all of the services that we provide is that we bring motion to cameras, and we do it really, really smoothly. And I think that's really what one of our USPs are. So whether it's flying up in the sky, whether it's down on the ground, whether it's somewhere in between, we've got all of those areas covered in the best possible manner with the best possible technology available in the world.
It's fantastic. I think you put it very nicely with being motion to cameras. Let me ask you this. I heard you talk about this on another podcast, I think maybe a year or so ago, where you mentioned that there are 28 industries that you found applications for drones in, and now you talked about the 4 sort of big ones that you're working with. Is there sort of sense on how you choose the projects that you would continue to associate with or build out on? Now I understand that the monetary aspects and the financials are obviously one of the big drivers of those decisions as well. But beyond that, are there certain filters you have in place where you say, hey, this is something that we definitely want to do, while this is something that we'll try, but maybe not for the long term? Any thoughts on how you choose that?
No, that's a brilliant question, because over the period of this decision making, we've realized that actually monetary decisions are important, but they're actually not the most important, or probably not even the ones that you should be taking the decisions on. And again, these are all things that you hear people give you advice on, but they're very hard to take as advice. They only make sense when you experience them. And right. This your question's been one of them, because all of these big industries of mining and telecom and roads are massive industries. So if you look at the numbers, the potential in those industries is huge.
Right.
But what was really missing in all of that was passion. And Gaurav and me couldn't see ourselves running a business, working in this business for 10 years where all we were doing was progress monitoring for roads or mapping railway tracks. And it was a brilliant business. Application of that technology is phenomenal in those areas. So that bit of it we were excited about. But
right.
To be able to sustain consistent work and dedicated work across a 10-year period or a 5-year period where almost 7 days a week you're dedicated to doing what you're doing requires immense amount of passion. It's not something that you can get up every morning and do something that you don't care about too much and do it like you would be doing a startup, because a startup
right.
is going to require every bit of your energy to be able to dedicate to it. And one of the key things required in that was passion. And so that helped us filter out a lot of the larger industries. When I spoke about 28 industries, those was all of the mining and telecom and roads,
right.
railways and so on. Disaster management, a whole bunch of different applications of drones. But I think really what helped us narrow down was a combination of two things. What can help us scale this business to, and this very quickly gets me to the point about where we want to take the story. How can we build a brand out of India that has global significance in the shortest amount of time? And that larger philosophy of being able to what we want to get to helped us realize the importance of passion. And that helped us narrow down and say, okay, these 26 other industries that are great and have, long-term potential for sure. And, maybe we will be able to transform the solar industry with drones. But no, that's not what we want to do. We want to focus on this, build layers of technology. They might not be as complex as what we were doing, but build technology for broadcast, build technology for sports, build technology for cricket in a way that, we're able to show the sport in a way that nobody's ever seen before. Right. And that's really where we are now positioning ourselves. So, we built a layer of technology for cricket, which is augmented reality. So we at the moment are the only company that is able to do augmented reality on a drone live. So we're able to fly the drone, put in augmented reality graphics as part of the live game, and we can put in live statistics and live scores and live data of who's batting, who's bowling, head to head comparisons, team to team comparisons, and so on. And we are able
And
to
all of this is like rendered in real time.
Rendered in real time, updated in real time. So as the ball is bowled, the scores are updated, the data is updated, everything is real time, and it's fired, and it's not just something theoretical that we're talking about. This is stuff
Right.
that people watch on their television. So we did this, and because of this technology, we're being able to do a lot of international expansion, which is part of the larger vision of the company. We've been able to do the Women's World Cup recently, where throughout the Women's World Cup, you had augmented reality on the drone. Typically, you would do it on a jib or a 4-point camera system, but this is the first time we've been able to introduce that technology on a drone, and it's really exciting to be able to do that. And we're looking at being able to build layers of tech on top of all of our devices to be able to really add value to the storytelling of those sports or the storytelling of Bollywood.
I just love the clarity of thought with which you said that. I think it's super important within this sort of avalanche of technology that is coming our way and entering all parts of our lives. Super important to have that clarity of purpose of what you want to really do, and you pegged it on passion. I really love that. Let me follow this up with pretty much my last question about Quidich specifically is, are there any companies that you're looking at globally to be sort of your North Star, to say, hey, this is who we want to be, or this is what we want to be in the future? I mean, to give you a sense, when I was at TVF, one of the things that we kept telling ourselves was we want to be a company that has the scale of Disney and the nose of HBO, but the speed of Facebook, right? So obviously, one of those grand statements you tell yourself to keep your morale and energy up at startups, right? Is there something like that you have at Quidditch?
There are. I wouldn't want to say them on a public forum because they are all potential eventual exits for us. So I'd like to keep them close to our chest at the moment.
That's completely fair. Let me move this on and talk about the times we live in. Right, coronavirus is like this sort of semicolon to all our lives, especially on the entertainment front. One of my previous episodes, I was talking to Vineet, who runs ESP at Group M, and he firmly believed that we need to reinvent. It's not a band-aid. It's not a band-aid that's going to fix it. We need to reinvent this industry at a larger macro level. How's that? How do you expect that to impact the drone tech industry? Specifically, if I start about live events, right? Sports leagues events not looking likely to come back. Although I think the Premier League has come out and said we'll try and bring it back on the 5th. The Formula One has come out and given a sort of target calendar saying, okay, maybe this time. But I take all of that with a pinch of salt. What do you think is going to happen? How does that impact the video tech and drone industry for you?
So I am a bit of an optimist. So I'm going to give you a very positive answer, because if I start thinking about the fact that we're not going to have sports for a while and we're not going to have films for a while, it just hurts me to think in that direction, because it is a massive hit for our organization.
It is existential for the entire industry, right?
We had a lot planned out for, like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, I realized that business is all really about planning. So we had planned the next 3, 4, 5 months, keeping something like the IPL in mind. We had hired people based on the execution we were going to do. We had spent a lot of money on newer tech, better equipment, more number of equipment as backups, and then suddenly we might be in a place where that entire tournament might not happen. So anyway, I'm not going to go down the negative thought process, because what is going to happen is going to happen. I'll tell you what my positive take on this really is. And I think, I'm not going to talk about how it's affected and how bad it is and where it would come from. But I think it's important to also acknowledge the opportunity and the reality of the situation. I think the reality of the situation is that it has driven us to become more efficient in ways, especially in our country, where things like video conferencing and video calling was not a norm, and people shied upon it, and I had to travel from Andheri to, South Bombay just to do a meeting, which I knew was a 5-minute conversation, and could have very easily happened on a Skype call. But you still had to make that 1.5 hour trek down and back. I think with what has happened over the last month and a half with this lockdown, I think one of the key things is that fundamentally we're going to be a lot more open to having conversations like this, which I think is very, very efficient for our cities. I think working has become a lot more efficient over this time. I've noticed it in my organization, which is, a lot more scattered in terms of operations. We've got to be on the field to be able to operate. And yet we are being able to use this time very, very efficiently and do all the things that, we were not being able to do in the times when you're running on a treadmill every day. We're being able to tackle a lot of interesting things that had been pushed under the carpet during this time, and being able to add a lot of efficiencies that way. And I think for the drone industry, which is what your question was, this is a mind blowing opportunity of a time. And again, it's really sometimes I surprise myself with looking at opportunity even in a situation like this, because it is really a bad situation that the world is in at the moment. But I think it's really about being able to find opportunities and making the most of these times. And I think what the drone industry has been able to do at this time has been mind blowing. I don't know how much of it you and your viewers have seen on the internet or in the papers, but this is the time when the entire drone industry has come together and joined hands and said, let's see how we can help the forces fight against this battle against Corona. And what we've done is we've got this industry body called the Drone Federation of India. And through that, we've kind of got all of the drone operators and drone companies to come together under one roof and say, all right, let's go to different police forces and give them this tool. So similar to what I mentioned about our experience in Nepal, we're now being able to use that same philosophy and use it in the current Corona times, where what are the key things that you want to ensure? You want to ensure that your police forces are not getting exposed to the virus itself. You want to limit the risk. You want to be able to cover and do surveillance of larger areas in lesser amount of time, because you want to make sure that people are not violating the lockdown and are staying in their homes, because that is, till we don't have a vaccine, that is probably the only way to be able to fight this virus. Absolutely. What we've been able to do as a drone industry is offer a solution to, let me take the example of Mumbai police. We're doing this across multiple cities, Delhi, Bihar, Gujarat, but let me take an example of what we're doing in Mumbai. In Mumbai, we've got 45 drone pilots that are flying from their own terrace. They fly the drone, cover a 600-meter radius around their house, and they're able to click photographs. Now, we've created a very small integrated engine at the back, where all you do is put up that photograph onto a Google Drive, and we've got a front end which our team sits out of the police commissioner's office in Mumbai, the Drone Federation team, and that photograph gets uploaded, automatically filtered into severity. So if we see more than 10 people, we know it's a severe situation. Automatically, because it's from a drone and we have GPS information, we're able to pull out the live location. And in that front-end software, you click one button and it gets that photograph along with the GPS location gets pushed to the local police officer in that area to be able to go and contain that zone. Now, a solution like that is phenomenal for being able to help the police forces. But equally importantly, it's important for the drone industry in fixing the perception of what people think drones are. Because drones have traditionally come from, a very violent background of how they were used in the defense. And that is really the inceptions of where drones have come from. But the drones that we are talking about on this podcast today are not those drones. They're not the drones that go and harm people. They're the drones that actually have, like human beings, there are good people and there are bad people. There are good drones and there are bad drones. And if you use the drones well and you use them as good drones, the applications are beautiful. And I think what this has done, this whole experience of being able to support the fight against Corona, has really helped people understand help the police forces understand how they can better use the technology in tough times, help the regulators and the forces really understand the potential of the technology. And that for me is a really, really exciting outcome that has come from the situation that we are in today.
I think you delivered on your promise of giving me an optimistic ending to this scenario. That's beautiful, man. I really and this whole bit about the 45 drone pilots on their terraces helping police out. I think there's a brilliant story there as well, about those people contributing in their own sort of capacity there. Let me ask you this though. When you're setting up a drone shoot in general, right, there are certain sort of considerations that you have to keep in mind. There are regulations that I think it's the AAI that has the regulations in India. The Airports Authority of India has the Indian regulations, right? I think so.
It's the DGCA.
DGCA, right? That's the one. DGCA, right? So, what from your experience? What it's a two-part question. Sorry. From your experience, what are some of the thumb rules that that you might want to keep in mind when you're setting up your own sort of personal drone shoot? Just from your experience. And the second is, do you see the work that you're doing right now with the cops or with the government? Do you see that having a sort of knock-on effect to relaxing some of the rules that might be in place? Again, if you think it's a question that's too loaded, I know you're DFI president. If you think you don't want to answer it, perfectly okay.
The regulation in India is a very tough situation that we are in, because the fact is that drones are very tough to regulate. They have issues that are far beyond just an operator being able to operate for a positive cause. The risks involved are very high, so it is very tough to regulate. But having said that, unfortunately, we are lagging far behind in the global race for regulation. And regulation is going to be one of the key drivers or roadblocks in the drone story of India. And it's really up to our overall government and our industry to be able to work together to be able to get it to a point where we make it as easy to do business in this industry. As of today, we are probably amongst the hardest countries to be able to operate drones in. Over the last 1 year, we have operated our systems in the Caribbean, in Europe, in South Africa, in Australia. And it's unfortunate to say that it's easier for me to operate in all of those countries working out of India than it is to operate in my own country. Right. Having said all of that, the government is working very hard to be able to solve the regulatory scenario. But as of now, it is a very, very complex process. And for us to get the end-to-end the permissions to be able to do one, let's say, for example, an IPL is about a 2-month process to be able to get all the permissions required. And, that's just an unsustainable timeline to be able to work with in an industry. So I'm not going to talk too much about it because I know a lot of work. The government is doing a lot of work. The industry is working with the government to be able to get to a solution that works for everyone. But at the same time, we need to do it sooner rather than later because, we can see over the last 2-3 years, startups that just came and went and they've gone because, the regulation just doesn't allow them to operate. They've got contracts in hand. They've got government contracts in hand, but they're not being able to operate because, the process of permission is just so complicated that, it just takes forever.
So I think Indian governments do tend to take their own sweet time wrapping their heads around new technology. Whether it's privacy or whether it's drones or stuff. But I think with the federation in place, with the lobbying body also in place, I think the journey might get smoother again. I think there's still a long way to go, like you said, from what I've read about it. But I think the starting point is having a lobby, a federation in place to have that conversation as well. That's heartening to know. My penultimate question to you, Rahat, is video and technology have really moved much further in the last few years than ever before, right? And it's happening not just at the creation end, but also the consumption end. And, smartphones, OTT, the paradigm has changed from what used to be community watching on a television, right? Being at the forefront of the creation end of this sort of revolution, what keeps you excited going forward? What is it that you have an eye on in the next 3 or 4 years that's like, hey, that's where I want to be, at least in the short term? That's what keeps my passion going.
So I think just the possibilities involved in technology and video with the kind of consumption patterns that we're looking at today are just so incredible that itself is a strong driving force in pulling the passion. And what I mean to say by that is that today when we've got devices where TV viewing has gone onto mobile phones, people are getting more and more comfortable with personalized viewing and personalized devices. the future that is possible in this industry has a lot to do with a lot of small elements of what we are working on. So, there is the future holds things like augmented reality glasses where you can start consuming content in those spectacles. A lot of what we're developing with our augmented reality is in those lines. We've done a lot of work with virtual reality as well over the years, flying big virtual reality cameras on the drone and filming for virtual reality and so on. And to be able to create experiences like that, which are far more immersive, I think the combination of being able to give a lot of our robots the vision and bring them closer to human beings, and then bring human beings closer to to the robotics uh, and the technology in a much more comfortable manner for both, for the robots to be able to see through computer vision, and through the human beings to be able to consume the robotics through things like virtual reality and augmented reality. I think where we are going to be in the long run of this company is going to be in the intersection of the humans and the machines. And I think that for me is really very, very exciting as the future of video and technology. I think that really, really inspires me, keeps me up at night just to think about, all right, if we are able to capture all of the cricket players on the field from 3 different angles, can we recreate them as a 3D model and offer a live virtual reality cricket game for somebody sitting at home and watching it on Hotstar? That's just a very off the top of my head example I'm giving you of the kind of future that consumption holds. And those kind of ideas today are super inspiring. I have goosebumps right now just talking about an idea like that, because the moment you've got innovation as an option, as a part of your toolkit to be able to create things that nobody has ever seen before, and we've already experienced that once with the augmented reality that we've done, that drive and that chase to be able to create something new that nobody's ever seen, and you were part of the creation and invention of that, is just super, super motivating. And I think your question about how consumption patterns and people are moving on to OTT platforms, and the whole paradigm of consumption and production is changing. I think all of this that we're doing is going to play a very interesting and important part of what this industry holds in the future.
I think that's you gave a fantastic example, and I'm waiting for that to happen, to be honest. We were talking about this earlier as well. I think the whole existential crisis of live events, and one of the things that we were talking about is how does VR play a role? Because there's definitely a role, right? It's technology that's available to us. We may not have completely figured out the modalities, but it is certainly part of a very bright, almost a cyborg future, maybe, in terms of entertainment, right? Rahat, truly fantastic talking to you about your work and about the future of video and technology coming together. My last question, as with most people on this show, is could you recommend a piece of entertainment, something that's close to your heart for my listeners? People have recommended books, movies, music. Some have even recommended memes. So yeah, over to you for a piece of entertainment.
This is not going to be a very good suggestion, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are going to really, really judge me for saying this. But the generation that we are, I think we decided to go and watch a film yesterday, which is from our past. And again, people are going to judge me for saying this, but I really connected back to my childhood so quickly when I saw that film, that I think I would really recommend this. And so this is a film called Kal Ho Na Ho that we watched yesterday with the family.
Beautiful.
And it's one of those really over the top rom-coms that we have seen in the past, but it was just so interesting to watch it after so many years, and to watch it and suddenly think about so many things in your life are decisions and things that you've taken, and a lot of that information might have come from a lot of these films that you saw in the past. And for me, just to connect with that and say, oh, I do this in my life, and probably this could have come very subconsciously from what I saw in a film like this 15 years ago. So yeah, I'm not proud of such a recommendation, but it was
I love that.
It was such a good experience to go back and watch it in this. I know I wouldn't have done it in any other time, but I think this lockdown was just something that makes you do things that you haven't done for a while. And, this was one of them. And definitely something I would recommend to go and do. Just, watch a film that you really connect to from the past. And Kalona was one of them for me, and Rock On was the other one, which really helped me connect to, myself 15 years ago. And it's just so exciting to be able to do something like that.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I don't think any of my listeners will judge. I'm a massive Shah Rukh fan. I love Kalona. And Rock On for that matter. A little bit of my backstory goes into Rock On as well. I used to have a band back in college, and movie close to my heart as well. So maybe I'll check one of those out. Oh yeah, you did too? Fantastic. What did you play?
I used to play the bass guitar.
Oh, lovely. The biggest one on stage. Yeah, that's nice, man. I used to sing. So, that's fantastic. Good to know. Rahat Kulshreshtha, thank you so much for making time. It's truly illuminating conversation about the stuff you're doing at Quidich, and all the best with that. I think with this, we've come to an end of a great conversation. Any closing notes from your end before we log off?
So I think just one last thing that I'd like to end with. I think one of the biggest learnings that we've had over the last 5 years is to be okay with failure. Again, this is one of those things that you hear so often people saying, but it's something that we've experienced. And it's something that I was really, really scared of when we started off. I was never an entrepreneur by design or by thought. I just stumbled across it, and it happened, as you've heard over the last hour. And I think one of the key things that I've learned from my co-founder and now really been able to imbibe is just not caring about failure. And that's been one of the things that have brought us to be able to really push ourselves to be able to get to where we are without having raised any money, no funding whatsoever, and yet be able to build a company to whatever we have been able to do so far has purely been out of this one thing of just not caring about failing. We're still in a position, despite the fact that we've got 20 people working with us, we've got all of these big contracts, we still run the risk of failing because of, the kind of risks that one has to take as an entrepreneur. And I think just not, keeping that as a criteria of decision making and just going with it because you feel that it should be done. Yes, it should definitely be evaluated. I'm not saying don't evaluate and think about failure, but it's definitely something that shouldn't be stopping you as part of your journey. And I think that's been one of the key learnings, and that's really what allows us to be able to continue going forward, is just letting go of the fear of failure and just enjoy the risks and go ahead creating what you really care about. And I think I just wanted to end on that because it's something that has been a very, very important learning as part of our journey. And, the more that one can share this and enable other people to be able to, imbibe small things like this, it's really rewarding to be able to do that. So, yeah, that's it from me.
Beautifully put, yeah. I have, in my lexicon, I have tried to change wins and losses to wins and learnings, to sort of work past that fear myself. But I think those are some pearls of wisdom that you brought out right at the end here as well. Rahat, once again, thank you so much for being on Storytellers and Storysellers. I had a wonderful time talking to you. I hope my listeners enjoy it as well. With that, we come to the end of another episode on this show. This is Vineet Kanabar saying goodbye.
बेटा, did you know 79% of all scientists in NASA are Indian only?
देखो, इंडिया में टैक्स सिर्फ मिडिल क्लास भरती है. Everyone is just enjoying free यार.
आजकल के youngsters are only interested in partying and enjoying. उनको देश की पड़ी ही नहीं है.
बेटा, तुम बस शादी कर लो, उसके बाद तो you can enjoy life like anything.
I will tell you what this country needs. This country needs 15 years of dictatorship. That is the only way to become a superpower. See the Chinese, how much they've progressed.
सुनो, तुमने ये WhatsApp forward देखा?
So what's common between all of these statements?
They're all absolutely rubbish.
Fake WhatsApp forwards that spread like wildfire.
And statements that defy any logic.
We are here to debunk them all.
Way of family WhatsApp groups, worst nightmare. Where what happens when you read a book.
Basically, we're just a bunch of guys who want to cut through the bullshit of everyone saying this, how it won't be true.
So that the next time someone confidently squeezes out some WhatsApp or Twitter BS, you can look them dead in the eye and go, Uncle, please sit.
So join me, Joel.
And me, Tushar.
Every Mondays for a fresh new episode of Uncle, Please Sit.
Shunyavan, 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 Shunyavan.
Hey, this is Shizaditya Mukhopadhyay.
And I'm Amit Doshi.
And we host Shunyavan, the weekly podcast based on conversations about startups, entrepreneurship, across verticals like food tech or fintech, and digital payments, logistics, e-commerce, and of course, all the stuff from VCs and investors as well.
Over the course of our run, we've had some really great entrepreneurs. We've had Zishan Hayat from Topper, Naya Sagi from Baby Chakra, Ankush Sachdev from ShareChat, and Akrit from Haptic, among many, many more.
Yep, and we continue to get some of the biggest, smartest, and most innovative folks in the country in this space coming here, talking to us, all for you guys to listen to.
So tune in every Tuesday on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts from, and get a chance to be a part of all of the tech banter and entrepreneurship conversations on our Slack channel. Talk to our guests, they show up as well. All you have to do is request an invite on ivmpodcast.com/Shunyavan.